All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the sworn congressional testimony of investigative journalist George Knapp. We're talking about a guy who has spent almost 40 years chasing a story that, let's be honest, most reporters would run away from. Now, let's get one thing straight right from the beginning. For George Knapp, this has absolutely nothing to do with believing in little green men. This quote says it all. For him, it's a news story, period. It's about following the facts, the documents, the sources, and they all point to one thing, a massive and maybe even dangerous secret. So let's really get into it. We're talking about a 38-year-long investigation here. This is a story about how one journalist's sheer persistence led him to evidence of government lies, incredible claims of recovered non-human technology, and even a secret arms race that was happening completely in the shadows. And the kicker? He laid all of this out under oath before the United States Congress. All right, here's the game plan. We're going to walk through his testimony in 4 key parts. First, how this whole investigation even started. Then, the paper trail of lies that really got him hooked. After that, we'll get into the really wild stuff, crashes, threats, and deep secrets. And finally, we'll look at this secret race that was happening over in Russia. Okay, first up, a journalist investigation. So you gotta wonder, right? How does a chief investigative reporter for a big TV station in Vegas end up in front of Congress testifying about UFOs? That's not exactly your typical career path. Well, his journey started way back in 1987, and it wasn't some fuzzy light in the sky that got him interested. Nope, it was the bombshell claims from a physicist named Bob Lazar. In 1989, Lazar basically blew the lid off everything, claiming the U.S. government was secretly trying to reverse engineer non-human technology out in the desert near Area 51. That one story, that single report sent Knapp down a rabbit hole that would eventually lead him all the way to Moscow, and you guessed it, right into the halls of Congress. All right, next section, the paper trail of lies. Before we even get to the crazy stories about crashed ships and secret programs, you have to ask, what was the first piece of hard evidence that made a serious journalist like Knapp think, okay, something is really going on here? Well, it was the government's own documents. And this is where it gets really interesting. I mean, look at this contrast. On one side, you have what they told the public. UFOs aren't real, the witnesses are kooks, nothing to worry about. But then, thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, we get to see what they were saying to each other in private. And their own memos from the Air Force, the CIA, the FBI, they're saying things like, these are real, not fictitious, and they outperform any aircraft known to exist. It's a total contradiction. And right there, that's what hooked him. As he put it, he was just plain ticked off that they were lying. For a journalist, this wasn't just some weird little mystery. This was a deliberate, massive deception that went on for decades. A lie told to the American people, and even to Congress. And that's what really lit the fire under him. Okay, so now we're at crashes, threats, and secrets. This is where the story really goes from a paper trail to something much, much more intense. We're talking about claims of actual recovered craft and witnesses being silenced, sometimes in very scary ways. So to check out Bob Lazar's story, Knapp does what any good reporter would do. He went on the air and basically put out an appeal. If you know anything about this, please call me. And the response? It was huge. More than 24 people called in, each giving him little bits and pieces of the story that all seemed to fit together. But that's when things got really, really weird. Because a really disturbing pattern started to emerge. He testified that 6 sources, 6 in a row, were visited by these mysterious agents the very next day after they talked to him. We're talking the classic Men in Black scenario. These guys would show up, unannounced, and basically threaten people into shutting up. The implication was just terrifying. Someone was listening to his newsroom phone calls. And the threats weren't subtle. One source was told, "It's a big desert out there. It would be a shame if anything happened to either of you." You, meaning her and her daughter. I mean, that's a veiled death threat, plain and simple. Knapp said this was just outrageous. This wasn't about government secrets anymore. This was about protecting people from what he saw as flat-out illegal intimidation. And look, these weren't just some random people making these claims. Knapp's testimony showed that some of the most powerful figures in the country secretly believed this stuff was real. We're talking about Senator Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, who was convinced we were in a secret tech race with Russia and China. Or Senator Barry Goldwater, a 4-star general who tried to see the evidence at Wright-Patterson and was told, quote, "hell no and never ask again." And then you have actual insiders, like a top DIA scientist, Dr. James Lacatski, who told another senator that the U.S. is, and I quote, in possession of a craft of unknown origin. But this story isn't just an American one. And this next part, the secret Russian race, is just mind-blowing. Knapp's investigation actually took him to Moscow right after the Soviet Union collapsed, and what he found there was evidence of a parallel secret program, and in some ways it was even bigger and more open than ours. Okay, so get this. The Soviets ran a massive 10-year military program called Thread 3. And this wasn't some small-time thing. This was a standing order for all military personnel, every pilot, every soldier, every sailor, to investigate and report every single UFO sighting to a central office at the Ministry of Defense. Their goal was simple: figure out how this technology works and copy it. And the encounters their pilots had were, frankly, terrifying. Knapp got his hands on their files. 40 times they scrambled fighter jets to intercept these things. Now listen to this. On 3 of those intercepts, the Russian pilots actually fired on the UFOs. And all 3 times, the Russian fighter was instantly destroyed. 3 times they fired, 3 times they lost their plane. It was a 100% failure rate. So after losing pilots and their most advanced jets, the Soviet High Command issued a new order. And that order was really simple: leave them alone. They basically concluded that whatever these things were, they had, and this is a direct quote, incredible capacities for retaliation. The new rule for Russian pilots became: see one, report it, but do not engage. Do not provoke them. But maybe the single most chilling incident to come out of those Russian files happened in 1982. A UFO appeared and just hovered over a Ukrainian nuclear missile base. You know, a base with ICBMs pointed right at the United States. So for 4 hours, this thing just sits there. And then, all of a sudden, the launch codes for the nuclear missiles just activate by themselves. The control panels light up, the crew couldn't shut them down, they were completely locked out of their own system. For a few terrifying moments, World War III was about to start, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the UFO vanished. It just zipped away. And the second it was gone, everything powered down. The missile systems went back to normal. The conclusion from the Russian military was stark. This wasn't a glitch. This was a message, a demonstration of who was really in control. So, when you put it all side by side, you see this really key difference that Knapp highlighted. Both the US and Russia were lying to the public. Both were secretly running these huge investigation and reverse engineering programs. But here's the twist. After the Cold War ended, the Russians actually admitted it. They came clean and said, yeah, this was real. The US, on the other hand, according to Knapp's testimony, they're still pretending none of it ever happened. So after you hear all this nearly 40 years of investigation, all laid out under oath, you see a picture of incredible, deep-seated secrecy, an arms race for technology we don't understand. And it all leads to one big final question. Who is really in control of this information? I mean, think about it. If senators, 4-star generals, maybe even presidents are being denied access and being kept in the dark, who is calling the shots? That's the real mystery at the heart of this whole thing. And it's a question we still don't have an answer to.